Hi guys, welcome to today's class. Today is the 17th. This would be third period, and this is part 2 of the 6.4 lesson. When I'm done with this lesson, I will answer a few homework questions from part 1. So if you need to see some of those questions worked out from page 405, then just stay tuned at the end. Feel free to try any of these problems, like pause the video, try them, and then play, so you'll see me work them out after that if you think that would be a better way to do these problems. So let's talk about example 1. So here's what's different. These indexes don't match. This is an index, a fifth root. This is an index, a third root, and they don't match. In the previous lesson, the index matched, so we were allowed to do something with them. And to further complicate things, this does not break down. There is no fifth root of 5. There isn't 5 things in there to be able to bring one out. And there is no third root of 5. There isn't 3 things to bring one out. And you can't multiply them because the index doesn't match. So you cannot multiply the 5 and the 5 and get 25. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to rewrite these. We're going to write this as 5 to the 1/5. That's what part 1 was about, was being able to rewrite a fifth root as a 1/5 power. And then this is a cubed root, so it's a 1/3 power. And since their base matches, since they both have a base of 5, you can do something with that. So I'm going to turn this paper over just to remind you about a little rule from algebra. In Algebra 1, you learned that if you were multiplying like bases, let's say you had b squared times b fifth. Well, if they had like bases, in this case a b, in our case a 5, then you can add the 2 powers together. This is the same thing as b to the 7th. Here's why. This is b squared, and we're multiplying it times b fifth, and that gives you a total of 7 of them. So that's what's happening here. We have bases of 5, and we can add these powers together. To add them, just grab a calculator and do 1/5 plus 1/3. And you get this fraction, 8/15. This is the same thing as 5 to the 8/15. If you prefer, you can write it 15th root of 5 to the 8th. But I would leave it like that. It's a little prettier. Okay, next one. Same kind of problem. So if you want to pause the video and try it, and then check it with me, you can. If not, just keep watching. This is the same thing as 1/7 power. This is the same thing as 1/2 power. Since they have like bases, you can add them together. So you're going to add 1/7 plus 1/2. 1/7 plus 1/2. You get 9/14. 3 to the 9/14. You can also write that 14th root of 3 to the 9th. Okay, this one is a little bit more complicated because these numbers don't match. I'm still going to write it. Actually, I was going to rewrite it as a fraction exponent, but let's bring some stuff out first. So because these don't match, I'm going to break them down. 2 goes into 80, 2 goes into 40, 2 goes into 20, 2 goes into 10. You stop there because nothing else goes into 5. And then we're looking for 4 of a kind because of that index. So these are 4 2s. A 2 comes out. The 5 stays in. And then here I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to break down the 40. 2, 2, 2. So this is how that breaks down. It's a cube root. These 3 2s are going to bring out a 2. Okay, so here's what happens. The 5 matches, but their index doesn't match. So I have to do with these what I did up here. The 2 2s I can multiply and get a 4. And these, here's what that looks like. 5 to the 1/4 times 5 to the 1/3. I need my calculator to add those fractions. So 1/4 plus 1/3. If you like to add fractions by hand without a calculator, you're welcome to. You get 7/12. So this is 4 times 5 raised to the 7/12. You cannot do this 4 times 5. Because remember, that's not really a 5. It's a 12th root of 5 to the 7th. And so you can't just multiply that by 4. So if they don't match, it's a little more complicated. You have to break them down. And then this part matched. Okay. There's another rule from algebra I want to remind you about, so I'm going to flip this over. Whenever you have a power raised to another power, so let's say we have b to the 2nd raised to the 5th. This is on your basic skills test too. A lot of people get confused whether you add these or multiply these. This is when you add them, when you add the two powers, when you have like bases that you're multiplying. But when you have a power raised to another power, that gets multiplied. So here's what that means. It means 2 b's 5 times. So this is happening 5 times. So whenever you have a power raised to a power, you multiply. Power to a power, multiply. Power to a power, multiply. Don't forget that. So this is a power raised to a power. So I leave the base and I multiply 1/2 times -4, so that's -2. Now, this is another thing we need to address. Whenever you have a negative power, so again, I'm going to flip this over so you can see a rule from algebra. Whenever you have a base raised to a negative power, let's say it's b to the -2, that's the same thing as 1 over this positive power, b squared. So whenever you have a negative power, that's what happens. So here, that is what is happening. It's 1 over 3 squared. That's 1/9. So your answer is 1/9, because 3 squared means 3 times 3, which is 9. You don't want to leave parts like that undone. If you can work it out, you should work it out. Okay. So same rule, power to a power, you multiply. Power to a power, multiply. So leave 5, multiply 1/3 times 9. 1/3 of 9 is 3. But again, if you want to do your fraction work on a calculator, you can do it like that. 1/3 times 9 is 3. So 5 to the 3rd. You can work out 5 to the 3rd. 5 raised to the 3rd is 125. So this answer is 125. You can do that whole thing in a calculator. Just remember, if you get an ugly decimal, then you need to do it by hand. So 5 raised to the 1, that's not how I do that. 5 raised to the 1/3. I need that whole thing in parentheses. So type it in exactly the way it appears, not like I just did. Parenthesis, 5 raised to the 1/3, raise that to the 9. And it does it for you, 125. Just make sure you type it in exactly the way it looks in the problem. Okay, so here we have this negative power, so it means 1 over. Remember, negative powers mean 1 over. Negative powers are fractions. Y to the 1/2, that means square root. So this is the same thing as 1 over square root of y. You are not allowed to leave a radical on the bottom. So we have to do something called rationalizing the denominator. To do that, you multiply by square root of y. Whatever you do to the bottom, you have to do to the top. And so your answer winds up looking like this. 1 times square root of y is square root of y. And square root of y times square root of y is just y. Twins, 1 comes out. So that's what that one looks like. And then this one is a similar problem to that one. The negative means 1 over, so 1 over 2 to the 1/3. That's the same thing as 1 over the cubed root of 2. You cannot leave that because there's a radical on the bottom. This time it's a cubed root. So we need 3 of these. We need 3 2's to bring one out. So you multiply by cubed root of 2 times 2. You need 3 of them, 1, 2, 3. Whatever you do to the bottom, you have to do to the top. So what you have on the top is 1 times this, so it's cubed root of 4. On the bottom, there's 3 2's, so a 2 comes out. And that is your answer. The reason you can't divide this 4 by this 2 and reduce it is because the 4 is in a radical and the 2 is not, so you can't reduce that. Some of your homework can be done on a calculator. If you get a decimal number, then just rewrite it as a radical and do it by hand, do the whole breakdown thing. But look at this one. If you raise 27 to the 2/3 power, it's just a nice pretty whole number 9, because it means cube root of 27, which is 3, and 3 squared is 9. So the answer is 9. If you have all numbers in the problem, try it in a calculator. Unless it's all numbers and you know you don't need to try it in a calculator because the 5th root of 5 is ugly, and you kind of can see that before you even try it. But on a problem like this, if you're not sure, if it's all numbers, punch it in a calculator and see if you get a nice pretty whole number. That happened on number 8, and it happened over here on number 5. Okay, almost done. There's a lot happening here. Remember, that whole group is raised to the 3rd. So negative 27 is raised to the 1/3 power, and x to the 15th is raised to the 1/3 power. Okay, this is pretty. If you raise negative 27 to, helps if you clear it, negative 27 raised to the 1/3 power, you get this nice pretty answer, negative 3. So that's a negative 3, and this one is a power to a power. Power to a power multiply. 15 times 1/3 is 5. And if you have trouble with fractions, you can do 15 times 1/3. And you get 5. So that right there is 5, x to the 5th. And that is your answer to that one. And then your last problem, this whole group is raised to the 6th. So x to the half is raised to the 6th. You're going to do power to a power. And y to the negative 2/3 is raised to the 6th. You're going to do a power to a power. So power to a power. Half times 6 is 3. That's x to the 3rd. And you can do that on a calculator if you want to. So it tells you 3rd power. And then power to a power, 2/3 times 6. Now remember, that's negative. Negative 2/3 times 6 gives you a negative 4. And again, your calculator will do that. Negative 2/3 times 6. So that's a negative 4 power. So we have to address this negative power. Negative means the y/4 is gonna move to the bottom. That's 1 over y/4. So this is x/3 times 1 over y/4, which gives you x to the 3rd over y to the 4th. That is your answer. If you had Miss Stacy last year, she would call this the flip side. She would call that taking it to the flip side is what she would say. So that negative power just flips it to the bottom. If you don't want to show all that right there. The negative power is just going to move that to the bottom. And your answer looks like this. Okay, so that is section 6-4, part 2. What I'm going to do next is just go over a few problems from your last homework assignment. So if you had no trouble on the last homework assignment, you can just stop this video and be done. If you want to see a few of the last class's homework problems worked out, then stay with me, or you can always pause this and come back to it if you have had enough for now. But I just picked out a few problems. So normally in class, I would ask you what problems you want to see, but we don't have that ability right now. So I'm just going to pick out some that I think might have given you guys some trouble. All right, so this is problems from page 405, the last homework assignment that I gave you. Number 1, number 5, and number 7 were all problems that were just numbers that you could punch into a calculator, and your calculator would do those. So just make sure you know how to use the caret button to raise to powers, and that you can raise to a fraction using the ABC key. So you would type in the number, and you would type in ABC, and you would type in the other number, and it would raise it to a fraction power. But this one, that won't work, because square root of 7, that's what that means. Square root of 7 is not a pretty whole number, and square root of 21 is not a pretty whole number. So if you punch that into a calculator, you get an ugly answer. And I'll show you what that looks like if you raised 7 raised to the 1/2 power times 21 raised to the 1/2 power. You get this ugly answer right here, and that's not what they want. They want simplified radicals. So I'm just going to rewrite this. This means square root of 7. This means square root of 21. That is square root of 147. You may be able to tell from here that that's 7, of course, and that's a 3 times 7. So it's a 7, a 3, and a 7, which means it has twin 7s. If you have no idea what I'm saying, it would be just breaking it down like we were doing on previous problems. So 2 does not go in there, but 3 does. 49 times. 3 doesn't go into 49, 5 doesn't go into 49, but 7 does. 7 goes into 49, 7. So here's our breakdown. So that's what I was saying. That's a 7, and that's a 3 and a 7. A 7, a 3, and a 7. Looks like that. Twin 7s bring out a 7. The 3 has to stay in. So that's your answer. That's number 9. Number 17. Y raised to the 1.2. Okay, you can't just punch this guy in a calculator either because of the y. We couldn't punch that one in a calculator because it's ugly. We couldn't punch this into a calculator because it's y. Well, this is kind of two parts. Y to the 1, you can just write as y. Y to the 0.2, that's a fraction. And if you want to know what fraction it is, you type in 0.2, type in this button that does decimal to fraction or fraction to decimal. So I press second and then I press that. And it tells me that it's a 1/5 power. So this is the same thing as y to the 1/5, which means 5th root of y. So that's your answer. Y is y to the 1, and 5th root of y is y to the 0.2. Number 19. Square root of 7x raised to the 3rd. Okay, notice this grouping symbol. That's why I picked this problem. Notice this grouping symbol. That whole group is raised to the 3rd. That whole thing is being square rooted. So the way you write it is power on the top, root on the bottom. That's just another way to write it. There's nothing you can do with this because there's no square root of 7. Because remember, the 2 is the root. Square root of 7 is not a nice, pretty whole number. So you can leave it just like this. If you write it like this, it is wrong. Because the 7 here looks like just a normal 7, not raised to any power. And the x is raised to the power, so you can't do that. The 7 is grouped with the x, which are both being raised to the power. So the moral of that story is, if it's grouped, leave it grouped. And then the last one I want to talk about is number 31. 100 raised to the 4.5 power. If it's all numbers, always just try it in a calculator and see what happens, because some problems like this one, the calculator just does it for you. 100 raised to the 4.5 power gives you this number. Now, it's long, but it's not a decimal number. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 zeros. So that's your answer. Some problems, if it's all numbers, just try it in a calculator. Unless you know, like this one, like square root of 7, you kind of know ahead of time it's going to be ugly. But if you don't know, then check it in a calculator and see if it just happens to be a pretty answer like this one. Okay, so those are just some problems that I picked out from your last homework assignment. I hope that gives you some help. And then just watch RenWeb and Google Classroom for more videos from the week. So now that this lesson is done right here, you can do the assignment from section 6.4 part 2. It is on RenWeb, and I'll also add that into Google Classroom today. So now you can do that homework assignment. I will talk to y'all next time. Have a great day.